"Keep laughing," someone said with a cruel grin. "Because no Omega who cries alone will ever be chosen." The words floated across the Moonfall Plaza like a cold wind, followed by scattered laughter that quickly grew into one merciless chorus beneath the silver glow of the full moon. Evelyn Carter lowered her eyes, willing herself not to let another tear escape, but the effort failed the moment she heard someone imitate the shaky sound of her breathing. Around her, nearly every member of the Grey Hollow Pack stood dressed in elegant ceremonial clothing, polished boots gleaming beneath lantern light, while silver banners drifted gently above the ancient stone square. Tonight was supposed to celebrate unity beneath the moon goddess, yet to Evelyn it felt like standing alone beneath an endless winter sky. She wrapped her faded gray shawl tighter around her shoulders, although the early autumn air was barely cool. The chill came from somewhere deeper, somewhere years of quiet humiliation had carved into her heart. She had spent her entire life trying to become invisible. She worked before sunrise, cleaned the gathering hall after every feast, tended injured animals no one else noticed, and quietly carried burdens that never belonged to her. Still, no matter how carefully she lived, somehow she always became the easiest target whenever the pack desired amusement. "Look at her," one young she-wolf whispered loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "She still came to the ceremony like she actually belongs here." More laughter rippled through the crowd. Evelyn forced herself to keep walking toward the edge of the square, hoping the darkness beyond the lanterns would swallow her before anyone noticed the tears shining in her pale blue eyes. She never reached the shadows. Pack Elder Rowan lifted one weathered hand. "Stay where you are, Evelyn." His voice carried across the plaza with practiced authority. Every conversation stopped. Hundreds of eyes settled on her at once. Her heartbeat stumbled. She slowly turned back, wishing the stone beneath her worn shoes would simply disappear. Rowan sighed heavily, not with kindness, but with weary disappointment. Every member of Grey Hollow deserves to witness tonight's ceremony. The sentence sounded harmless enough, but everyone understood its hidden meaning. She was not being invited to participate. She was being reminded exactly where she stood. Behind the elder, polished families gathered proudly around daughters wearing embroidered gowns of sapphire, emerald, and ivory, each hoping the royal delegation rumored to be traveling through the northern territories might notice their beauty. Evelyn looked down at her simple dress, carefully repaired so many times the stitching itself had become part of its design. She had sewn every thread with her own hands. It was clean. It was modest. Yet somehow it still made her feel like she had arrived wearing someone else's shame. A small child tugged gently on his mother's sleeve. "Why is she crying?" he asked with innocent curiosity. His mother leaned closer and answered softly, though not softly enough. "Because some wolves are simply born to stand alone." The words pierced far deeper than open mockery ever could. Evelyn pressed trembling fingers against her lips, trying to steady her breathing. She refused to argue. She refused to beg. She had learned long ago that defending herself only invited another round of laughter. So she stood perfectly still beneath the moonlight while voices drifted around her like invisible stones, each one carrying another reminder that she was unwanted, unnoticed, and easily forgotten. Then, without warning, the distant silence beyond the gates shattered beneath the synchronized rhythm of approaching horses, and although no one in the square yet understood why, every instinct Evelyn possessed whispered that the night everyone thought they controlled had just begun to belong to someone else. Evelyn remained exactly where she was as the echo of approaching horses rolled through the valley, but unlike everyone else, she did not lift her eyes with excitement. She had learned that hope was often the quickest path to disappointment. Around her, conversations instantly changed direction. The same wolves who had mocked her only moments before suddenly straightened their posture, brushed invisible dust from expensive jackets, and hurried to stand beside the most respected families. Excitement replaced cruelty with astonishing speed. Whatever had been coming through the northern gate was clearly important enough to erase every cruel joke from memory. Elder Rowan stepped forward, signaling several guards to prepare the entrance. Silver lanterns were adjusted. Banners were pulled tighter. Musicians quietly lifted their instruments, waiting for permission to play. The plaza transformed from a place of ridicule into a stage prepared for honored guests. Evelyn watched from the edge of the gathering, unnoticed once again. That, at least, felt familiar. She slowly wiped away the last trace of tears before anyone else could see them. Her father had once told her that tears should never become a stranger's victory. Although he had been gone for many years, she still remembered the warmth in his voice every time sadness threatened to overwhelm her. She inhaled deeply and forced herself to stand a little straighter. If she could survive one more night, tomorrow would come just as every other day had. Quietly, predictably, alone. A young servant carrying polished silver trays hurried past her and stumbled as one cup slid toward the edge. Without hesitation, Evelyn reached out and caught it before it struck the ground. The servant looked startled for only a moment before whispering, "Thank you." It was such a small word, almost lost beneath the growing excitement of the crowd, yet it carried more kindness than Evelyn had heard all evening. She smiled gently and placed the cup back onto the tray. "You are welcome," she answered softly. The servant disappeared into the crowd before anyone noticed the exchange. Nearby, two older women continued speaking as though Evelyn were invisible. "I heard the royal escort has crossed 3 territories in only 2 days. Perhaps the Alpha King himself is searching for a future Luna. Then our daughters must stand where they can be seen." Their daughters eagerly adjusted sparkling necklaces and carefully arranged loose curls as though every tiny detail might shape destiny itself. Evelyn instinctively stepped farther into the shadows beside one of the stone columns. She had no desire to compete with anyone. She simply wanted the evening to end. The distant sound of horses grew louder until every hoofbeat seemed to shake the ground beneath the ancient plaza. Then came another sound, quieter but somehow even more commanding. Wolves. Not ordinary pack wolves calling through the forest, but disciplined voices moving together with perfect unity. Every conversation stopped again. Even the children fell silent. Elder Rowan slowly lowered his head, his confident expression replaced by visible caution. The heavy northern gates creaked open inch by inch, revealing rows of mounted royal guards dressed in deep black cloaks trimmed with silver thread that shimmered beneath the moonlight. Their formation never broke as they entered the square with calm precision. No one cheered. No one dared. Something about their presence demanded respect without asking for it. Evelyn looked up almost by instinct, and for the first time that night, a feeling she could not explain stirred quietly inside her heart. It was not hope. Not yet. It was simply the strange certainty that whatever happened after this moment would leave nothing in Grey Hollow unchanged. The royal guards guided their horses to a perfect stop, their movements so precise that not even the restless breeze seemed willing to disturb their formation. Moonlight reflected across polished silver armor, casting long ribbons of light over the ancient stones of Grey Hollow Plaza. Every wolf stood frozen, waiting for someone to speak first, but no command came. The silence itself felt like an order. Evelyn remained beside the weathered column, almost hidden within its shadow, believing no one would ever notice she was there. That had always been the safest place to exist. Elder Rowan stepped forward with a practiced smile, bowing respectfully toward the arriving escort. "Grey Hollow welcomes the royal guard," he announced with careful confidence. "It is an honor to receive such distinguished visitors during our moon ceremony." The captain acknowledged the greeting with only the slightest nod, his expression unreadable. Instead of returning the formal welcome, his eyes slowly traveled across the gathered crowd as though searching for something very specific. The movement unsettled everyone. Families that had proudly pushed their daughters toward the front only moments earlier suddenly exchanged uncertain glances. Something about this visit no longer felt ceremonial. It felt purposeful. Evelyn noticed the captain's gaze pause briefly on several respected elders before continuing farther across the plaza. She quietly lowered her eyes again. Whoever the royal escort sought, it certainly could not be her. She folded her hands together to stop their faint trembling. The warmth she had struggled to recover after the humiliation earlier had begun slipping away again beneath the weight of unfamiliar tension. Without warning, the scent of rain drifting from the distant forest awakened a memory she had tried to bury. Nearly 6 months earlier, a violent spring storm had swept through the northern hills. She had been gathering medicinal herbs before sunset when she discovered a massive black wolf lying beneath a fallen oak tree. Rain soaked his thick fur, while one foreleg remained trapped beneath a broken branch. The animal had been exhausted, breathing slowly but watching her with alert golden eyes that carried neither fear nor anger. Every instinct had told her to run. Instead, she had knelt beside the stranger. Speaking softly so she would not frighten him, she had used every ounce of strength to move the heavy branch aside before cleaning the injury with herbs from her satchel. She had even wrapped the wounded leg with strips torn from her own cloak. When the wolf finally stood, he had not immediately disappeared into the forest. He simply watched her for several quiet seconds beneath the falling rain, his golden eyes strangely calm, almost grateful. Then he vanished between the towering pines without a single sound. Evelyn had never spoken of that evening, not because it was extraordinary, but because kindness had never seemed important enough for anyone else to hear. She believed she had merely helped an injured creature survive another night. The memory faded as quickly as it had returned when a firm voice echoed across the square. "Prepare the royal path." Guards immediately stepped aside, creating a wide passage through the center of the gathering. The crowd obeyed without hesitation, everyone moving back until only an empty corridor remained stretching from the open gate toward the ceremonial platform. Excitement quietly returned, but this time it mixed with unmistakable uncertainty. Whoever was about to enter was clearly someone whose presence alone demanded complete obedience. Evelyn instinctively stepped another pace backward, allowing others to move ahead of her. She expected nothing from the night except to leave unnoticed. Yet somewhere deep inside, beyond reason and beyond memory, the image of those calm golden eyes returned once more, and for reasons she could not explain, her heart began beating just a little faster. The air itself seemed to grow heavier as every royal guard stepped aside in perfect silence, forming two unwavering lines that stretched from the open gates to the center of Grey Hollow Plaza. No command echoed across the square, yet every wolf instinctively lowered their voice until only the gentle rustling of banners and the distant whisper of pine trees remained. Then a tall figure emerged from the darkness beyond the gates. He did not rush. Every measured step carried quiet confidence that needed no announcement. His black ceremonial coat, embroidered with silver threads that reflected the moonlight like flowing rivers, moved gently with the evening breeze. A dark cloak rested across his broad shoulders, fastened with the crest of the royal pack. Even before anyone dared speak his name, the atmosphere changed. Respect replaced excitement. Anticipation became reverence. Elder Rowan immediately bowed lower than before, joined one heartbeat later by every council member standing behind him. Families who moments earlier had proudly displayed their daughters now lowered their heads with careful discipline. Mothers gently pulled curious children closer. Even the musicians silently lowered their instruments without being instructed. Evelyn remained where she was beside the ancient stone column, almost hidden from view, unsure whether she should bow as deeply as everyone else or quietly slip away before anyone noticed her. She chose stillness. It had always been safer than drawing attention. The stranger's calm gray eyes slowly traveled across the gathered crowd, not with pride or judgment, but with deliberate patience, as though searching for something only he understood. Every family hoped that gaze might linger upon them. Several young women offered graceful smiles, carefully lowering their eyes before looking up again in practiced elegance. The stranger acknowledged none of it. His expression remained composed, almost distant, while the moonlight illuminated features that carried both quiet strength and unmistakable kindness. There was nothing loud about his presence. It was the absence of unnecessary display that made him impossible to ignore. One of the younger guards finally stepped forward and announced with steady confidence, "His Majesty, Alpha King Adrian Blackwood." A quiet gasp swept through Grey Hollow like wind passing through autumn leaves. Rumors about the Alpha King had traveled across every territory for years. Some spoke of his wisdom. Others admired the peace he had restored among rival packs. Many believed no ruler had visited Grey Hollow in generations. No one had expected him to appear during an ordinary moon ceremony. Elder Rowan quickly recovered his composure and extended both hands respectfully. "Your Majesty, Grey Hollow is honored beyond words. We have prepared our finest welcome." Adrian inclined his head with quiet courtesy, but his attention never settled on the ceremonial platform prepared in his honor. Instead, his eyes continued moving across the crowd with calm precision. It was almost as though the celebration surrounding him simply did not exist. The silence stretched longer than anyone expected. Wolves exchanged uncertain glances without daring to whisper. Even the hopeful smiles worn by several respected families began to fade beneath growing confusion. Finally, Adrian spoke, his voice calm and clear enough to reach every corner of the plaza without effort. "Thank you for your welcome." He paused briefly, his gaze drifting once more across every face gathered beneath the moon. "However, I did not come to Grey Hollow for a ceremony." The words settled over the square like falling snow. Surprise flickered across Elder Rowan's face before disappearing behind another careful smile. "Then may we ask the purpose of your Majesty's visit?" Adrian remained silent for only a heartbeat. During that single quiet moment, Evelyn glanced up from beneath lowered lashes, and although dozens of wolves stood between them, she felt an inexplicable pull, as though fate itself had quietly begun turning another page that neither of them could yet fully see. No one moved. The question Elder Rowan had asked still lingered in the cool night air, but Alpha King Adrian Blackwood did not answer immediately. Instead, his calm gaze continued drifting across the gathered wolves as though he were searching through faces rather than looking at them. Several hopeful families mistook his silence for careful consideration. Mothers gently encouraged their daughters to stand taller. A few offered graceful smiles, believing this unexpected royal visit might become the opportunity they had dreamed about for years. Elder Rowan quickly recovered his confidence. "Your Majesty," he said warmly, extending one hand toward the front row. "Grey Hollow is proud to present some of our finest young women. They have been raised with honor, discipline, and devotion to our traditions." One by one, beautifully dressed young women stepped forward, each bowing with practiced elegance beneath the silver glow of the moon. Their gowns shimmered beneath the lantern light, while quiet whispers spread through the crowd. Evelyn remained where she had been from the beginning, hidden beside the old stone column, believing the ceremony no longer had anything to do with her. She lowered her eyes again, hoping the growing attention focused on others would finally allow her to leave unnoticed. Adrian acknowledged every introduction with polite respect, but his expression never changed. He neither smiled nor offered unnecessary conversation. His attention seemed distant, almost distracted. After the final introduction, silence returned once more. Elder Rowan cleared his throat carefully. "If there is anyone else your Majesty wishes to meet, our pack will gladly make the arrangements." Adrian slowly turned his attention away from the line of honored families. His gray eyes traveled across the plaza until they reached the far edge where the lantern light faded into shadow. For the briefest instant, his gaze rested there. Then he asked a single question. "Where's the girl who was crying?" The words landed softly, yet they echoed through the square with greater force than any shouted command. Confused expressions appeared everywhere. Several wolves instinctively looked toward one another, uncertain whom the Alpha King meant. Others quietly remembered the humiliation that had unfolded only minutes before. The laughter that had filled the plaza now felt painfully distant. Elder Rowan hesitated. "Your Majesty, I am not certain which young woman you are referring to." Adrian remained perfectly composed, the Omega standing alone. His voice stayed calm, but every word carried unmistakable certainty. "She was here when I arrived." An uneasy silence settled over Grey Hollow. No one laughed now. Mothers lowered their eyes. Fathers exchanged uncertain glances. Even those who had mocked Evelyn only moments earlier suddenly wished the memory would disappear. Near the back of the gathering, the young servant whose tray Evelyn had saved quietly glanced toward the shadow beside the ancient column. Following that small movement, another pair of eyes turned, then another, until the entire crowd slowly looked in the same direction. Evelyn realized far too late that every face in the plaza had found her. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear her own breathing. She instinctively stepped backward, wishing the shadows could hide her once again, but there was nowhere left to disappear. Elder Rowan followed the crowd's gaze and finally saw her standing alone exactly where she had remained since the beginning of the ceremony. His confident expression faltered. "Evelyn?" he asked, almost unable to believe the name leaving his own lips. Adrian's eyes never left her. There was no surprise in his expression, only quiet recognition that seemed impossible between two strangers who had never officially met. for reasons Evelyn could not understand. The same calm certainty she had once seen reflected in the golden eyes of an injured black wolf returned to her memory with startling clarity, and the impossible connection between that forgotten rainy evening and this silent moonlit plaza suddenly felt closer than ever before. Evelyn could feel hundreds of eyes resting on her, as though the entire plaza had forgotten every other face. A few minutes earlier, those same eyes had looked at her with ridicule. Now they were filled with confusion. She wished she could disappear into the darkness beyond the stone walls, but her feet refused to move. Elder Rowan cleared his throat, struggling to recover the confidence that had abandoned him. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "this is Evelyn Carter. She is one of our Omegas." His brief hesitation did not escape anyone. Even now, he searched for words that would keep her unimportant. Adrian Blackwood did not respond immediately. Instead, he took one calm step forward, then another, leaving the center of the royal procession behind. His guards remained exactly where they stood, making no attempt to follow. Every measured step echoed softly across the ancient stone, and with each passing second, the silence grew heavier. The Alpha King stopped only a few feet from Evelyn. For the first time that evening, she gathered enough courage to look directly into his eyes. They were gray beneath the moonlight, calm and steady, yet something hidden deep within them felt strangely familiar. She could not explain why. Adrian studied her quietly, never with pity, never with judgment. His attention settled on the simple gray shawl wrapped around her shoulders before drifting lower. There, across the back of her right hand, a faint pale scar rested just above her wrist. It was small enough that most people never noticed it. Adrian did. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You kept the scar," he said quietly. Evelyn blinked in surprise. "Your Majesty?" He lowered his gaze briefly toward her hand before looking back into her eyes. "You injured yourself while cutting fabric." Her breath caught. Very few people even knew how she had received that scar. It had happened during the storm 6 months earlier, when she tore apart her own cloak to make bandages. She had sliced her hand against a broken hunting knife hidden beneath wet leaves, yet she had continued wrapping the injured wolf's leg without another thought. She had never told anyone the story. There had been no reason to. Confusion spread through the gathered crowd. Elder Rowan frowned. "Your Majesty, how could you possibly know that?" Adrian slowly turned toward the assembled wolves, his voice remaining calm enough that no one needed silence to hear it. "Because 6 months ago, during a spring storm in the northern forest, an injured traveler collapsed beneath a fallen oak." Evelyn's heartbeat quickened. The memory returned with startling clarity. Rain pouring from black clouds. The scent of crushed pine needles. Golden eyes watching her without fear. Adrian continued. The traveler could no longer continue his journey. Most would have walked away. His eyes returned to Evelyn. One person did not. The plaza became so quiet that even the distant sound of leaves moving through the forest seemed impossibly loud. Several members of the pack exchanged uncertain glances as pieces of an invisible puzzle slowly began fitting together. Evelyn stared at Adrian, barely able to breathe. "The wolf," she whispered before she could stop herself. A gentle smile, almost too small to notice, appeared at the corner of Adrian's mouth. "Yes," he answered softly. "The wolf." In that single moment, the memory she had carried alone for half a year transformed into something entirely different. The injured animal she had believed was only a stranger had never been ordinary. Standing before her beneath the full moon was the very life she had unknowingly saved, and the impossible recognition reflected in his calm eyes told her that he had never forgotten the quiet Omega who chose compassion when no one else was there. No one spoke. The truth lingered over Gray Hollow like the silver mist that drifted between the ancient pines, impossible to deny and equally impossible to escape. Faces that had carried pride only moments before now reflected disbelief. Elder Rowan looked from Evelyn to Adrian as though searching for an explanation that would restore the familiar order of his world, but none came. The Alpha King stood with quiet composure, his attention never wavering from the young woman who had once offered kindness without expecting anything in return. Evelyn struggled to find her voice. "I did not know who you were," she admitted softly. "I only saw someone who needed help." Adrian inclined his head with genuine respect. That is exactly why I never forgot you. His answer settled deeply into the silence. There was no grand speech, no dramatic gesture, only simple truth spoken without hesitation. It carried more weight than any proclamation. Adrian slowly turned to face the assembled pack. His calm expression remained unchanged, but the quiet warmth in his eyes gave way to unmistakable resolve. When I arrived, he said, I did not first notice your banners, your ceremony, or your traditions. His gaze swept across the gathering until every wolf lowered their eyes. I noticed a young woman standing alone while everyone else chose laughter over compassion. The words were measured, yet each one landed with undeniable clarity. No one interrupted him. No one dared. A pack is not measured by the strength of its strongest alpha, Adrian continued. It is measured by how it treats the member with the quietest voice. Several wolves shifted uncomfortably. The memory of the evening's cruelty had become impossible to ignore. Mothers gently lowered their heads. Fathers avoided looking toward Evelyn. Even those who had joined only because everyone else had laughed now felt the weight of their silence. Adrian's eyes settled briefly on Elder Rowan. Leadership is more than preserving tradition. It is protecting dignity. Rowan swallowed carefully before offering a respectful bow. Your Majesty, what happened earlier should not have happened. His voice lacked the certainty it had carried throughout the ceremony. Grey Hollow accepts responsibility. Adrian gave a slight nod, acknowledging the words without celebrating them. Responsibility begins with honesty. He looked across the plaza once more. Every person here has an opportunity tonight to decide what kind of pack they wish to become tomorrow. The statement did not sound like condemnation. It sounded like an invitation to become better. That made it even more powerful. Evelyn remained speechless. For years she had believed kindness disappeared unnoticed, like footprints washed away by rain. Yet the one act she had never mentioned had crossed kingdoms and returned to her beneath the same moon that had witnessed it months before. The young servant whose tray she had saved earlier quietly stepped forward from the crowd. Gathering unexpected courage, he bowed respectfully toward Evelyn. Others slowly followed his example. First one, then another. Soon dozens of wolves stood with lowered heads, not because anyone had commanded them, but because shame had finally given way to understanding. Tears gathered once again in Evelyn's eyes, but these were different. They no longer carried loneliness. They carried the fragile beginning of healing. Adrian watched the moment unfold without speaking. He had not come to humiliate a pack. He had come to remind them that true strength never grows from fear or pride. It grows from the courage to honor goodness wherever it is found, even when it appears in the quiet heart of an Omega that everyone else had failed to see. Evelyn stood motionless as the last echoes of quiet apologies faded beneath the moonlit sky. She had imagined countless times what it might feel like for someone to finally believe her heart was worth seeing, but none of those dreams had prepared her for this moment. The silence surrounding the plaza no longer carried rejection. It carried reflection. Wolves who had once looked through her now saw her clearly for the first time. Adrian remained only a few feet away, his calm presence steady and reassuring. He did not step closer immediately. He understood that trust could never be demanded. It had to be freely given. The gentle breeze stirred the edge of Evelyn's worn gray shawl, and for a brief moment she looked down at the faded fabric that had traveled with her through years of quiet hardship. Without a word, Adrian slowly unclasped the dark royal cloak resting across his shoulders. The silver embroidery caught the lantern light as he carefully held it in both hands. Every eye followed the simple movement. Instead of placing it upon her himself, he paused respectfully before her. Evelyn, he said softly, his voice carrying through the silent gathering with effortless clarity. Months ago you offered kindness to someone you believed would never repay it. You expected nothing in return. That choice revealed more strength than titles or rank ever could. His words settled gently into her heart. She searched his face for pride or obligation, but found neither. There was only sincerity. Adrian lowered himself onto one knee before her. A wave of astonishment swept across the plaza. Elder Rowan's eyes widened. Several members of the royal guard exchanged quiet glances, though none appeared surprised by their king's decision. Adrian looked up at Evelyn with the same calm respect he had shown from the moment he recognized her. Tonight, he said, I will not ask you to stand beside me because I am your king. I ask only because I have seen the person you truly are." Evelyn felt tears gather once more, but this time she made no attempt to hide them. They no longer carried shame. They carried relief. Adrian continued, his voice warm yet unwavering. "After everything that happened here tonight, after every unkind word that should never have been spoken, will you allow me the chance to earn your trust?" The question surprised everyone. No command, no royal decree, no expectation, only a sincere request that honored her freedom to choose. Evelyn looked across the plaza. She saw lowered heads, humbled expressions, and the young servant who had quietly smiled at her earlier. She remembered the lonely years that had shaped her, but she also remembered the frightened black wolf who had trusted a stranger beneath a spring storm. Compassion had connected their lives long before either of them understood why. Slowly, she reached forward with trembling hands. Instead of taking the royal cloak immediately, she gently touched the edge of the fabric, then looked back into Adrian's eyes. A small smile, fragile but genuine, appeared across her face. "Trust grows one choice at a time," she whispered. "So does hope." Adrian smiled in return, not with triumph, but with gratitude. He carefully placed the royal cloak around her shoulders, and as its warmth settled over the faded gray shawl beneath, the entire plaza witnessed something greater than a royal gesture. They witnessed dignity being restored, not by power alone, but by humility, respect, and the quiet courage of two hearts choosing kindness above everything else. Evelyn drew a slow breath as the royal cloak settled gently around her shoulders, its warmth unlike anything she had felt in years. It was not the rich fabric that comforted her. It was the quiet respect that came with it. For so long she had believed her kindness disappeared unnoticed, carried away like autumn leaves on the wind. Yet standing beneath the full moon, she finally understood that goodness never truly vanished. Sometimes it simply waited for the right moment to return. Adrian rose to his feet, meeting her eyes with the same calm sincerity that had guided every word he had spoken that evening. Neither of them rushed to fill the silence. There was no need. Around them, Grey Hollow remained completely still, as though the entire pack recognized they had witnessed something far more important than a royal visit. They had witnessed the beginning of change. Elder Rowan slowly stepped forward, his shoulders carrying none of the confidence he had displayed earlier that night. He stopped before Evelyn and bowed his head with genuine humility. "Evelyn Carter," he said quietly, "I failed to protect someone who should have always belonged within this pack. For that, I offer my deepest apology." His words were not perfect, but they were honest. One by one, other members of Grey Hollow followed his example. Wolves who had laughed lowered their heads. Those who had remained silent acknowledged that silence itself could leave wounds. No one was forced to apologize. They chose to. Evelyn looked at each familiar face and realized that forgiveness did not erase the past, but it could shape the future. She offered a gentle smile that carried neither pride nor resentment. "Let us make tomorrow kinder than yesterday," she said softly. The simple sentence spread through the gathering with quiet power. Adrian smiled with unmistakable admiration. It was the answer he had hoped for, though he had never expected. A ruler could establish laws, but only hearts willing to change could build a better home. The Alpha King extended his hand, not as a command, but as an invitation. Evelyn looked at it for a brief moment before placing her hand in his. Their fingers met naturally, without ceremony or spectacle, and together they turned toward the path leading beyond the ancient gates. No triumphant music filled the night. No voices called out. There was only the peaceful sound of leaves swaying beneath the moonlit sky as the royal guard respectfully stepped aside to clear the way. The pack watched quietly as the young Omega who had once stood alone walked forward with quiet confidence, her head no longer lowered beneath the weight of rejection. She had not become stronger because someone powerful had noticed her. She had always been strong. Tonight, everyone else had finally learned to see it. As Evelyn and Adrian reached the gates, she paused for one last glance at Grey Hollow. The plaza looked different now, not because the stone walls had changed, but because the hearts within them had begun to. The silver moon shone over every rooftop, every pine tree, and every soul gathered below, offering the same light to all without judgment or favor. Evelyn realized that compassion had never made her weak. It had quietly shaped the path that led her to this very moment. Side by side, She and Adrian disappeared into the moonlit forest, leaving behind not a story of revenge, but a lasting reminder that true strength is gentle. Dignity belongs to every soul, and the smallest act of kindness can change the destiny of an entire kingdom.